Hi, everybody. My name is Vivian, and I'm a very grateful recovered alcoholic. And by God's grace and mercy in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, one day at a time, strong sponsorship, people like you in rooms like this, I owe my life to you, and everybody in my life has been benefited by the fact that I've been able to stay clean and sober one day at a time since January 3rd, 1994. As I told you before, if you were here and didn't hear it, I came in 91, and I think we all have angels that lead us or direct us. So somehow we are led into this program. And it's just absolutely amazing when so many even don't know about the program. I had never heard about Alcoholics Anonymous prior to walking in here. I didn't have a clue about Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew that I had an alcoholic dad, which I knew very little about. And what little I did know about him, I didn't want to be anything like him. We never talked about him. His name was never mentioned. And so we grew up in a household without a dad, but not without a Mark. And we grew up Irish Catholic. That really, I don't really need to say any more around that. I'm pretty sure you know the story. And that was kind of normal. But I want to go right back to something before I forget, because I will. In 91, I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and hung around in here for a couple of months. And they told me I needed to get a big book and all the literature that went with that, and a 12 and 12, and there was a lot of other books. There's a whole table of books back there, so I got one of everything and promptly walked on out the door with it without paying for it. And and later on, I would make amends for that. But I didn't know what I didn't know, but I just took all those books home and set them down on the counter, and that's where they stayed for a long time, 2.5 years, before I ever actually got a sponsor and started working this program. And I don't know why, I don't know how I hung on like I did, because I didn't have any recovery. And one day God would just simply make it or reveal to me that what I was doing was not working in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm showing up and I'm not drinking. That is an amazing thing for an alcoholic of my type. Alcoholics like me drink every day, and there towards the end I couldn't stop drinking, and I was drinking round the clock. I didn't draw a sober breath for a good 20 plus years when I walked into the rooms. And to drink like I drank right up to the very end, and then walk in the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous and not have the desire to have another drink, is a miracle all in of itself. But sitting around in here with untreated alcoholism, believe me, is a miserable place to be. So the time would come that someone offered me one of them funny little cigarettes. And I've been doing a lot of that in my lifetime. I was a dealer, so I knew all about it. And I might as well get this out there, too. I was carrying guns all the time. When I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was carrying a .357 Magnum. Now, I don't know what I thought I needed to do in here. But I was ready and prepared. And so people get a big joke out of that, because I did, you know, and today at least I'm legal with it, so I have a license to do that. And I'm really good with it. And I enjoy it, and I have a healthy respect for it. But, you know, I changed my date when I finally got honest enough and surrendered. I had one more surrender sitting right in these rooms, stone cold sober, clean and sober, not doing a darn thing but just dying on the inside. And I couldn't live on the outside the way I was. I just wanted to put a gun into my mouth. So I wanted to kill myself sitting right in the rooms, and that's what untreated alcoholism will do for you. You better hook up with somebody as quick as you can and get busy, because what that next person sitting next to you or somebody like you can do that no one else can do out there. Because if other people could do this for us, don't you think we'd all be over there now? We're not. We're all over here. And this is where we're your help. You know, they told me when I walked in that there was some good news and there was some bad news. The good news is that I'm an alcoholic, and I didn't like that, because I didn't think I was. A lot of people knew that I was, but I didn't know that I was. I didn't know what I didn't know until I knew. But the bad news is that you're my help. So there. And the people that were telling me this were people that I drank with, so I knew how bad they were. But we're full flight from reality. We have that, we're bodily and mentally different. We have that peculiar mental twist. Now, I don't know if you really fully understand the nature of that, but we are poster children for mental disorders, mental illness, and all of that. We qualify for every diagnosis out there, and most of us come in here with a lot of them and continue on with that. And there are those that have to be on medications for those kinds of things, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I'm so grateful that I haven't had to pick up another thing and change that, alter how I feel from the neck up in all of these years. Once I surrendered that last time, sitting right in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And for that, I am eternally grateful. One day my son would come to me after many years of being out there in the streets and doing what they do, doing what we all do, and he said, "Mom, I want what you got." And that was the happiest day of my life. And he went on to have about 8 years of sobriety, and then he moved and he stopped going to meetings. He stopped calling his sponsor. I started calling his sponsor. That didn't help him any. I started telling on him. Didn't help his sobriety a bit. And he just moved out to Oregon, and his whole ambition in life now is to be a marijuana farmer. So I don't know how that's going to go. I don't know, he might make a lot of money. I might be happier about it. I don't know, because they're doing pretty good out there. God bless him. Al-Anon has saved my butt with that, and his too, because I had to stop fighting the disease, because all I was doing was talking to the disease with him. And I had to learn how to deal with that. I had to learn to detach with love and love him where he's at. Meet him exactly where he's at and not try to change or alter or live in that self-righteous indignation about what I think he ought to be doing in his life. And how can I say that that's not his journey that he needs to go through to get where he's got to go? And boy, that's a millennium from where I was thinking and where I came to, all because of this beautiful program from Al-Anon. So I feel like I'm a double winner, and I'm proud to say so. And, you know, I felt my whole life, I always felt lesser than, apart from, or different from. I don't know about you, but I never felt like I fit in anywhere. I felt like that square peg in a round hole. And I just never felt that I was good enough, or good as, or equal to. I always felt that everybody was better than. And I spent my whole life, my earliest memories were I never felt good enough. And I don't know where that comes from, but it came early on. And as a child growing up in Columbia, South Carolina, which is where I was born, my whole family came from New York. I was born in Columbia. I was born with some stomach deformities, and I was in and out of the hospital a whole lot. For the first 9 years of my life, I was mostly in the hospital, and I was given a drug that you may know a little bit about. It's called Paregoric. And it's too bad I didn't hang on to that when I was older, but they were giving me that with increasing dosage because I was just, I had the last rites 3 times before I was age 9. So I was in pretty bad shape. And the last time that I got the last rites, I remember waking up and all my family is around the bed and they're holding hands and they're reciting the Our Father. And I'm just a little bitty thing, weighed hardly nothing, and I couldn't get. They had to intravenously feed me. That's the only way I could live. And I just remember it was a very painful time in my life. So don't think a lot of us don't get here with post-traumatic shock syndrome. I don't think anybody gets here without it, really. Not that it's a prerequisite, but let me tell you, we're broken when we get here to the core. And so I walked, I laid in that bed, and I happened to come to, and I noticed that the priest was at this side of the bed, and my family was standing around holding hands, reciting the Our Father, thinking that they were getting ready to bury my mom was getting ready to bury her little girl. And something happened, and I didn't die. And I stayed a little bit longer. I really couldn't tell you the time. A lot of that's very vague. But I ended up coming home and having somewhat of normal life, as normal as it could be. I'd missed a whole lot of school because I couldn't attend. And so I was very different from the other kids because I couldn't play with them and I couldn't do the things all the other kids were doing out there. So that began to be a big part of the separation, you know, and I eventually could go back to school, and so I was always a grade behind. And so I was able to go, and I don't know how that, so there's, when I look now and I look back in hindsight, I see the evidence of God working in my life even then, because there was a huge miracle. Given a death sentence, survived, moved on through that, and I would have the last rites one more time before I came to you. So I've been doing a lot of dying in my life. I think we all do. I don't know that we're even aware of it. I just think that it's just part of who we are and what happens, part of our destiny, I guess, if you will. We're alcoholics, and if you're like me, you don't know that you're alcoholic. You don't know that all this is wrong. I just thought that if everybody out here would just straighten up, my life would be okay. But I didn't know to look in. So I went on through school and lived in Columbia. I didn't know my dad. You know, here's the disease of alcoholism. You know, your dad, I knew that he was, the only thing I did know is that he was an alcoholic and that he abused my mom. And I know that I never wanted to be anything like that. And I would go on to be just like him, only worse. And there's the disease of alcoholism. And so I would go on to have a somewhat of a normal life, if you can call living in an alcoholic life. And you know, I remember all of my family moved down from New York and lived there with in the area where we all lived. And every weekend would always start this. It would always be the same show. You know, everybody would come over to have a nice big dinner, and it all started off fun. And there were never small little things of whiskey. There were gallons on the table, you know, on the bar. And they'd start drinking, and then they'd be laughing, and before you know it, they're screaming and yelling, and then they're going home. And that was just how it was. And so, I mean, by the age of 10 or 11, I'd already decided I was going to smoke Viceroy, I was going to drink Pabst Blue Ribbon, and I was going to do what they did, because this is what you do. You know, there's the example. And we don't know what we don't know. Well, you know, and fast forward on a little bit, and I finally got into school and did pretty good. For someone who had attention deficit disorder, I was all over the place. If Vivian would just sit still and pay attention, well, I wish I could. I could not do that for anything. My mind was like a BB on a plate. I was all over the place all of the time. I was forever getting in trouble with that. And they didn't really know back then what that was about. But anyhow, I got through. And it's just by the grace of God, I just barely skimmed through school by listening. And so anyway, I got through school, and I started dating this man in high school. And my mother was so anxious. I mean, by now she had remarried to this guy and had 3 kids. So we went from 3 kids to 6 kids. The North meets South, and that was interesting. And and we lived out in the country, and we were really abject poor at that point. I mean, we had a 2-room house, and I remember walking in and looking. There was a newspaper on the floor. I'm going, boy, we have gone to hell and back here now. It's like it was, oh my God, where are we? And I just felt like we had just, I don't know, I just didn't understand. Thrown in together, and we all just tried to make it work. And my mother worked her little bones to the, you know, ground her bones to this, whatever that saying is, and to support us, because now my stepdad is doing body work, and he didn't always have work, and so it was kind of interesting. So we got through we managed to survive, and for one thing I can look back now, you know, one of the things on my 4th step was I resentful at my mother, and I don't know why. Because that poor woman, all she ever did was support and work her little self to the bones just to get clothes on our backs and food on the table. And I remember putting her down because I think I said something Like, I remember her never telling me she loved me. I don't ever remember her telling me that. And you know, when I took this stuff, when I finally did my writing, all in my 4-step, and I took it to my sponsor to the 5th step, she said, "Did you ever stop to think that by the time she got home from work every single day, and she bought clothes for you kids, all of you, not one of you, that she put food on the table, and that she took care of all your needs, and maybe that's how she loved you?" You know, a change in perception. Only this program can do that. And I loved that woman with all my heart after that, you know, and that was many years after I'd gotten into the program. It took a while for me to do my step work and to come to terms with all of my things on there. And when my mom passed away, we were clear and clean. I was able to spend some quality time with her, which I had never been able to do. And we spent some just beautiful, beautiful time together. And we laughed and we sang together some old songs, some old Irish songs that she loved. And that is an amazing gift to be able to take that and give to her. I didn't give her anything, but I gave her myself. I gave her the daughter she deserved. That's what we get to do here. And because there is a program that teaches us how to have a design for living and how to treat people that have loved us dearly throughout our whole lives. And all I did was just tear her apart because she had to stand aside and watch me just go down the trenches. My alcoholism took me where it took me. I married this man I was dating. He was 12 years older than me. And she couldn't have been happier to get me out of that house. I think she was trying to cull the herd. And it didn't matter that he was so much older. I kind of liked the idea because I was being treated like a princess, and just about anything I wanted he would get for me, and I kind of liked all that. And the one thing I really liked the most was he had this magnificent horse. I used to go up there and ride, and just love this horse. I told him I probably would have been better off marrying that horse, done less damage to that horse than I did to that poor man, because all he did was just love me. And we had 2 beautiful children. I had this, you know, my firstborn was a son, and I told you a little bit about him, Todd Anthony, and he looks exactly like his dad. He's a handsome man. And a couple years later, I just wanted to have a daughter so bad, and I started studying all the scientific papers I could find around X and Y chromosomes and what you can do and how you can do to increase your chances of having a daughter. And I don't know if all that really back then, but we had one. And it was just magnificent. I thought each time I had a child, every time I got married, every time I did something else, that everything was going to be better once I got over here. And once I got over here, it was never good enough. Or if I just could have another child, that would make a big difference. And then that didn't make a difference. You know, and I found that I just was totally ill-qualified to be a parent. I had no skills. I had no living skills. I had no parental skills. And I didn't know what to do with them pretty little babies. And so, you know, what happens is that they grow up in an alcoholic household. And I didn't know that I was an alcoholic. My husband didn't know I was an alcoholic. He used to say things like, "Vivian, if you just wouldn't drink so much." And I was totally convinced, and I would have passed a lie detector test. If you put me on it, I would have said, "I don't drink any more than anybody else." But in fact, I was drinking a lot more than everybody else, and everybody else was beginning to notice it. And once you start down that road, believe you me, people start to notice you're drinking a lot more than you do. And I saw the friends that I had in high school and that were in my wedding, and friends that we had as a couple began to just stop coming around. And I'm a blackout drinker, so I'm saying and doing things that were improper, I'm sure disrespectful, and God only knows what else. I don't really want to know. But I can tell you that it was inappropriate, and I embarrassed my husband, and I embarrassed my kids. I just couldn't be there for them. And at some point in my drinking, and my alcoholism had progressed to such a point that I loved those kids no less on the day that I walked out of that house, and I'd loved them the day 24 hours before. And I don't know why on that particular day that I had to leave. I had to leave. And I walked out of that house, and I left those two little babies with their dad because I knew he'd be a better parent. And I went on out to pursue what I needed to do and get the job done. And I thought if I could just go over here and start a life over here that it would be so much better. And gradually, my husband would divorce me, and rightfully so. And I got to see those kids every once in a while, and I had joint custody. I don't know how that happens to somebody like me, because I sure did not deserve it. And I would less and less show up for holidays, for birthdays. I would start off with the right attitude and idea about going out and getting presents and being there for Christmas and to bring these things to home. And I would go to the bar and have a few drinks so that I could get to the store. I couldn't even get to the store to get the presents. Somewhere a week later, I'd realize I'd never even gotten there. And when I did see those kids, it talks about it in the book, about broken hearts of lonely kids. You know, we just don't know the damage we cause out there. And don't you know we would have changed it if we could? And I just broke their little hearts. And finally, the drinking took on, you know, the progressiveness of the disease. I drank more and more, not less and less. As you know, that's what happens. And I don't know what's happening. I just know that I can't live without it, and I can't live with it. And I'm drinking now for the consequences caused by the drinking. And every time I do see my kids, which is rarely and rarely, the pain I see in their eyes when they look at me like, what is wrong with you? What is going on, Mom? And I don't know what to say to them. And so that's how I spent the next couple of years of my life. In and out. I mean, I was able to work. I don't know how I did that. I had a little business I was able to survive, but I was just surviving. As an alcoholic, you're not excelling in much of anything because the alcohol will not allow that to happen. And it was just taking me down and taking me down and taking me down, and to the point where I just was living in this oblivion, where I just didn't know the true from the false anymore. And one day, I went over to pick up my daughter and my son, and I wanted to go take them up to the lake. And I was determined that I was going to make it this time. And with every fiber in me, that's exactly what I had in mind that day. And I went over there, and my son said he couldn't go because he had a baseball game, and so he didn't go. But I got my daughter in the car, and we would go up to the lake. And I would hook up with some friends of mine that I used to drink and party with, and they had a daughter the same age, and so they were out playing all day, and I couldn't be out there with her for one single second. Even in her presence, I was not there. You see, the disease is a disease of separation. It takes everything of any value. It takes and it takes till there's nothing left to take. It takes your very soul. It takes the most beautiful things you've ever had or wanted in your life. And it takes it away. Piece by piece, so there's nothing left. So finally, on the way home, that afternoon, all afternoon, I finally get it together to get her in the car on the way home. And we have a car accident. And the actions I took that day caused that car accident. My little baby girl died. And I remember going to we were both in the emergency truck, the ambulance, and I couldn't see anything. Everything was black. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear everything that was happening. And he said, there's nothing we can do for this little girl, for for her. And I was an insane, crazy woman, but I don't think I was able to move. I really think I was dying. And by the time I got to the hospital and they put me in the surgery because I was hemorrhaging, the car had turned over on me and everything from the waist up was completely crushed and broken. So I was doing a lot of hemorrhaging. I remember being up in the surgical room and looking down. I was up in a corner and I was looking down at what was going on. And it was the most unusual and extraordinary experience. And I sort of checked out right there. You know, it was kind of an amazing experience. I found myself sitting on a cloud with my daughter. And we were not talking, but we were communicating. And I don't know, felt like it was an eternity, but I'm sure it was just a matter of seconds. And my daughter turned to me and said, "Mom, you can't stay here. You have to go back." And I did not want to come back. I had done enough dying here. The last thing I wanted to do was come back. And so the next thing I knew, I woke up in ICU, and I was there a very, very long time. I missed my daughter's funeral. I was brought up on manslaughter charges, and I had to deal with that after I got out of the hospital. And I kind of was just numb. When I finally got out of the hospital, and I didn't draw a sober breath for 18 years. Until I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you'd have asked me all about that, I would have told you it was an accident, and I blame God for that accident for all those years. I couldn't bear to see anybody in my family. I couldn't talk about it. I never went there. I never wanted to be a part of anything to do with any part of that. And alcohol is a good way to escape everything. And I moved down to Hilton Head, South Carolina. I made that geographical change. I went down there and started a little business and hanging out with and now I'm hanging out with lower companions, as if I wasn't already one myself. And now I'm dragging them down. And it's just kind of amazing. And so I'm hanging out with some pirates and some drug cartel people, and I had a little mafia business going on in there. And I don't know how these things find you when you're out there. You just kind of fall into all this stuff. And I'm just thinking, I'm living high on the hog because they're all driving nice Mercedes and doing real well. I'm going, well, this is what I want. It's total, complete insanity. Most of those people are dead. They're gone now, or in jail, or both, or in between. And it was just amazing. But that was my greatest ambition in life. There would come a time that I had a hair shop, and there was a young lady that I drank a lot with, and I knew she had problems with her alcoholism, but I could never see my own. And so Vicki was going down. We had been drinking this night, and she was going. I had left her for some odd reason. I went home. On her way home that evening, she ran into two cars head on and went through the windshield of the last one. And how she survived is nothing more than a miracle. And so I knew that she was in trouble, and I went up to the hospital and visited with her. And back there's such a small little place. Our little island's 12 by 5. Everybody knows everybody, so I went up there and visited with her and cut her hair and cut the glass out of her little hairs, and her face was practically peeled off. I couldn't even recognize who she was. That woman ended up coming out of the hospital after many surgeries and ended up going into rehab. And she needed to come to work she had to work somewhere, and nobody else really would hire her, and I love Victor, come on in here. And she set up her little business right in my salon. And I used to walk in and look at her and see those clear, blue, crystal, sparkling eyes every morning. I just wanted to slap her every time I walked through there because she was sober and doing beautiful. You know, she'd gone away and she got it. She got the miracle. And she said to me only one time, Vivian, if you ever want to go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, you can go with me. And that was it. And isn't it interesting how God just puts these people in your life that makes a difference forever? And so it came a time, one more night, where the progression of my drinking had reached such a proportion that I couldn't draw a sober breath, and I couldn't get enough. And no matter how much I drank, it was never enough. And I drank myself sober sometimes. I'd go to bed, pass out, literally, and come to. Now, I understand that smarter people than me got up and took another drink, and they were fine. Not me. I stayed there and suffered through whatever was going on, and just stayed in that absolute living hell. And for this last night of my drinking, before the day I came in to see to you, something happened. Something like what Wayne shared last night, and it's interesting. It was like I was watching a video of my life. And it was being revealed to me that I could keep doing what I was doing and I was going to die, but I was going to lose everything and everybody in it. And I'd already lost a lot. And that was it. I mean, it wasn't like there were any profound messages, you need to go do this, this, and this, and there's a direction and an address. No, it just said, you know, this is what's happening. It was like I had a sneak preview of my life as it had been and what was coming. And the very next morning, I walked in, and I didn't really have planned to say this to Vicki, but I said, maybe I'd like to go to a meeting with you. And I think that was God planning that idea. I do remember that very night saying, God, help me. That was it. It was no big formal thing, but that was my surrender. And Vicki didn't want to miss a note on that one, so she said, how about today? No, I want to look good for y'all. And I looked pretty bad that day. Like you care. You know, we're all interested in ourselves so much. And so the next day I went, and that happened to be January 3rd. And so I walked in the rooms, I stole the books, sat around in here, and I didn't do anything. And so I started doing the funny other little stuff, and got nowhere fast, and I was returning to that place of absolute insanity. I was sitting in a meeting one time. We have a meeting at a church, St. Luke's, and there was a big cross, just like a 10-foot cross up there, and all of us, we'd get our chairs out of wherever they keep them, and then we bring them up here and set them up. You have a meeting, and when you're done, you pick your chair up and you take it back. And I got busy because I was always seeing people I hadn't seen around in a while. They were in here. So I said, hey, how are you? And so I'm busy talking to somebody. Up under my purse, up under the seat, my purse was there, and all the other chairs had been put away except for mine, and my gun had fallen out, was laying out on the floor. And nobody wanted to mess with me or that or the chair or anything because they didn't know how crazy. And let's face it, we're not, you know, we look like the Breaking Bad when we get in here. And so, you know, that's the kind of craziness. We just don't know what we don't know. And anyhow, you know, that was the beginning. And I sat around in here for a couple years doing what you shouldn't be doing, which was nothing that I should have been doing. And I hit my knees in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, not drinking a drop. And now the other stuff isn't working, and I'm miserable, and I've returned to that place of absolute insanity, and I can't live another day sober, and I can't drink. And all I want to do is I'm thinking about how to kill myself. That's the best idea I can come up with, is how I'm going to blow my brains out. And where I'm going to do it and all that jazz. And I don't know, you know, I think God, when we get down that low, when we're just that broken, I think that they're just broken enough that there's a crack of God's light can come in. And this one day that I was having that thought after the meeting, I went to get up and down. Now, here's a little something about me today that I'll tell you about. I used to get up and down while the meeting was in progress. You know, I was very busy. I had a lot to do and think about during that 1 hour. Coffee was very important. And as soon as I finished that cup, I had to get another cup. You know, you can't be without anything. It's insanity. So this one day, now I'll tell you, ask my girls, you better not be getting up and down while if you're at a meeting that I'm at and I sponsor you, I better not see your butt. I said, I don't care if you wear Depends. I don't care if you got to have 6 cups of coffee in front of you. You're going to sit your butt down. You're going to listen to this meeting. You're going to listen to what they got to say, because, by God, your life depends on it. Don't you let me catch you. I know our lives depends on that 1 hour in here today. I know how vital and critical and crucial it is to have this 1 hour to get us through the next 23. And if we don't pay attention here, you're not going to get it on the corner where the crack dealer is or whoever, whatever. So I'm up and I'm back and I'm getting ready to go get yet another cup of coffee, like I need one more cup of coffee. And I run completely head on into one of my respected elders at the meeting who's just been watching me. You know, they watch you come in. Believe me, we notice everything. You may not think we notice, we know everything, because we've already done it. You can't BS the BSer. We're experts at it. We've been doing it longer than you've been alive. So anyway, where was I? I don't know what I was talking about. I ran to go get another cup of coffee, and I'm all the way back in the back. Now I got to move my chair. Of course, it makes noise. And then I get up and I walk back, and I'm going to get the coffee. And I literally turn the corner to go into the kitchen to get the coffee, and I just run flat on into a guy by the name of Dick J., who had become known in our area as the four-step guru. And that's all he talked about. And I said, God, if I got to listen to him talk about this one more time, I'm going to punch his face out. I just couldn't stand it. But I didn't know what he was doing or what he was saying. He had the gift. He had the message. He was carrying the message of recovery. And I got up and I had no intention whatsoever to ask him to help me. But that day I ran into him and my mouth opened to say, I'm sorry I ran into you. And I said, would you please help me with my 4-step? And he was like, who the heck just said that and why? I did not say that. And Dick says, right after this meeting, young lady, because they've been watching me, we're going up to that pew and we're going to say that 3rd-step prayer. And I can tell you, there's the evidence of God working in my life. So right after that meeting, I'm stone cold, clean and sober now, and I have nothing but just raw material, and I'm about ready to implode and explode and anything else you can think of. We go up to that bench and we say that 3rd-step prayer, and he says, now I'm going to tell you what you're going to do. You're going to turn your life and your will over to care of me, because you're doing a pretty poor job of it. Who is this guy? But for once in my life, I actually would listen to him. And I would take direct. I had surrendered. And I don't know any about what all this is about, but I had surrendered to that moment, to that day, to that man, that he could do a better job than what I'd been doing in my life. I walked up to that bench and we knelt down and said that 3rd-step prayer, and he said, when I'm going to give you your 4-step instructions. You're going to go home and you're going to get started on that today. And from this day forward, there's only one question you can ask me, and that is, what do you do next? Nothing else. And you're going to have an assignment every single day. And you're going to do the writing, and if not, I'm not going to waste my time. And I was just willing. Absolutely willing. So I said that 3rd-step prayer. He said, you say that 3rd-step prayer before you work on your 4th-step, and you ask God to deliver to you all the information that needs to be on there, and you get yourself out of the way because you can't think and you can't do a good job of any part of this, but God can give you everything you need. And I didn't believe a word. I went home and said that 3rd-step prayer, and I got my little pen and paper out, and I sat down, and bang, the names started coming up and bubbling up in the muck of this brain that was left. And I had over 100 names in less than 20 minutes. It blew my mind. And I don't know if that's going to happen for you. I just know that God must have felt that everything needed to be fast-forwarded in my life because he was getting ready to lose me. And he said, from that list, you're to write out your resentments. And then you're to write out what it affected. And then you write out how it affected you. And then we're going to do that turnaround where we resolutely look at your part. Well, I don't know how to do any of this, but Dick is telling me, because the only question I can ask is, what do I do next? And I'm just doing it. I don't have a better idea. I'm all done. I go home every day and I ask Dick, what do I do next? And he gives me the next set of instructions. And in less than 2 weeks, I'm done. I'm ready for a 5th step. Boom, we're done. I don't believe in holding anybody back. I think we're given just a minute bit of time here to help each other, and we better, by God, get busy or we're going to lose them. We're losing way too many as it is. Get them in here, get them busy, quick. I told them, I don't want you sharing at the meetings. This is what they told me. We don't want you sharing at the meetings. We already know how to do the mess. Until you have the message, you don't have anything to say here. This is not group therapy. This is Alcoholics Anonymous. You're going to sit still and get quiet, and you're going to learn how to listen. And I did. I just was willing to do whatever. I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. So I got busy, and I got this thing done. And Dick left and moved back to Boston, and he left me with this 5th step. That is not recommended. As now I'm getting crazier by the minute. And a woman would come to Hilton Head and speak, and I'm starting to get that arrogance and that defiance and a little bit of that, belligerence happening, and I don't want to hear another old fart share their experience, strength, and hope ever again. I am over this deal. Because there was a big conference coming on, and this old-timer said to me, you're going to host this woman. And so I didn't know what that meant, so I didn't do anything. I didn't call anybody. I didn't go see her. I didn't ask if I could help her. That is not recommended here. You don't know what you don't know till you do. But that woman that I didn't want to go hear became my sponsor of 22 years. And I took my 5th step up to her, and she had moved back. She had moved all the way across country from California. When she was a member of the Pacific group out there. I don't know if y'all know much about those people. They're like Nazis out there with the big book Nazis. And so that's who I ended up with. And she said, you're going to bring that 5th step and you're going to come up to Augusta. And I went up there. It was about a 3-hour ride. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have my gun with me. I was a mess. That was my higher power. And I got up there, and she said, you're going to do step 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 today, because I don't trust you to go home and do any part of this by yourself. And I'm telling you, I was just turbocharged through this, and I don't see why you can't do it anymore, any way, anyhow. That's how I do it. That's how I was taught. So when you leave from me, you're on step 9. And I'm telling you, you got to get busy. I got 3 categories, where you're going to do these now. The worst one should be first. And I just help people get on that. And I tell you, you have to be accountable while you're doing it. You call me before you call me what happened. You say that third step prayer before you go out there and ask for their forgiveness. And where have you been wrong, and what can you do to make it right? I have seen amazing, extraordinary miracles happen as a result of what was so freely given to me. And so anyway, I went up there and gave her this, and the first name on the list, of course, was God. And I had every right to have a big resentment about that guy because I just couldn't handle that Catholic God. But I found a new God. She said, Vivian, why don't you just have your own concept of God? Why don't you just let it be a good, orderly, what would she call it, group of drunks? Let that be your God. Or why don't you just try using my God? My God's big enough until your God can get big enough for you. I was willing. I just was so broken. I was so willing. When you're that desperate and that broken, you can get willing. Thank God. And so the very next name on that list was my daughter. I was so resentful. I was so resentful that she would leave me. And I have something I want to read. It's about Father Ed Dowling. It says, the tragedy of our life is how deep must be our suffering before we learn the simple truth by which we can live. I'm telling you that that unbearable burden of such unimaginable grief was the most difficult things for me to handle. Once I came to the realization that I had caused that accident, that I actually was the reason my daughter died in that car accident that day. Up to that point, I was totally clueless. And when Michael told me that, I didn't want to live another day. I didn't have any big awakening or burning bush or anything. I just wanted to kill myself for what I had done. And she knew how bad it was for me, and she knew that I was suicidal anyway. So she said, we're going to go to that grave, and you're going to make amends to her. So we went. Once I'd gotten all the writing done, that was one of the first ones we were doing. And she said, you're going to make an amends to her, and you're going to write a letter. And you're going to tell her everything you've ever wanted to say to her if she was standing right in front of you. And it took a long time because I didn't know where that little grave was. You see, I couldn't go there. Michael said that you don't have to do any part of this by yourself. I'm going to go with you every single step of the way. So she went with me. It was an extremely, extremely hot day that day. It was 110 degrees in Columbia on Elmwood Cemetery, and there was not a breeze stirring. And it was just a sweltering day. We were profusely sweating, both of us. And it took over an hour for us to locate the little grave, and once I found it, I went back to the car and I got some flowers and a couple things that I wanted to bury there, and I got my letter that I had written to her. And she said, you're going to just read that letter. And you would think I'd have that memorized, wouldn't you? But I don't. And I don't know why that's so hard, but I said, my dearest Tina, I'm so proud to tell you, but you probably already know that I've been sober in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm sorry that it took me so long to take these actions, and I want to make amends to you for the actions as an irresponsible, undependable, and absent mom. I am responsible for your death, and I'm eternally sorry. I love you with all my heart. I promise I will use this tragedy to help others and hopefully prevent other tragedies like this from happening. I embrace you and I love you, Mom. And I can tell you that the minute I started reading this letter, and amazing things started happening, which I can't explain or understand. But the minute I started reading this, An amazing wind started kind of wrapping around us, and we were immediately cooled, and our hair was standing straight back, and there wasn't a leaf moving because there was a tree right over here, but nothing was happening except for this wind that was just wrapping itself around us, and I felt the presence of God. I felt the presence of my daughter, and I felt the presence of forgiveness for the first time in all those years. And the minute I stopped reading this letter, the wind stopped and the heat returned. And I took Michael back to the car because she had had sinus surgery a few days before, and I left the car running with the air conditioned so that she could be cooled. And I almost got in the car to leave. But something told me to go back, and I went back and I sat down at that grave for a little while, and I had never really cried over any part of that. And I felt this was the time, so I went back and I just had communion with my daughter. And I just sat there for as long as it needed to happen. And I don't know how long I was there, but I just sat there. And I just sat there, and then my daughter spoke to me. And she said, "Mom," in her sweet little 9-year-old voice, she says, "Mom, I have a life to live, and so do you, and you go on out there and do it." And that's all she said, and it would be years before I understood what that meant. And I know today that this is what she meant, that I would share this tragedy, that perhaps it might help somebody else not make the same mistakes I made when I was out there doing what I was doing. I had a friend of mine that today is my sponsor, because my sponsor for 22 years had a lot of surgeries, and she was on a lot of pain pills, and she couldn't be available. And I love that woman with all my heart, and I talk to her on a regular basis. But I have another sponsor and this is why I have her as my sponsor. She wrote a letter to me, and she said, "Vivian, it's been a long time coming. I'm so glad I found you." And she wrote a poem to me, for my daughter and for her daughter, who had the same tragedy and who ended up in jail on manslaughter charges for the same reasons. And her poem goes like this. "There's a little 9-year-old girl up in the sky, and she holds my baby between her legs on a swing of silver lace clouds. Her arms clasp around her waist so she won't slip, and my baby's downy hair tickles her nose, but she keeps on singing sweet lullabies and tells her stories of ladybugs and fireflies. She tells her what it's like to go to school, and something my baby never got to do, and she tells her she wasn't sure if Santa Claus was real. My baby seems to know what she means as she giggles and squeals, and then she spoke of her mother with the warmest sound, and the baby of mine, she looked around, and their eyes met, and they knew the same disease had brought them there. An illness so ugly, it didn't care that their mothers loved them so dearly and would have died in their place. How they wished and prayed to see their faces just one more time and to smell their smell, to let them know that now they were well. That baby, the disease had retreated after quite a fight. One day at a time they win this war." That little girl whispered into my baby's ears as she swung even higher into the clouds, and she said, "I know our mothers didn't want it this way. I hope they know we have each other and that it's okay." And I want to tell you, I'm sitting there, and pardon me, I can't get through out this without snot flying everywhere. When my desperation became greater than my arrogance and my defiance, I think God made it possible and put somebody in my life to turn my life around so that I could be of maximum usefulness today. My sponsor would send me this card, and I just love it. She says, cling to the thought that in God's hand the dark past is the greatest possession you have, the key to life and happiness for others. And on the other side of this card, it's a picture of an eagle, and it says, eagle medicine, which must be earned, results in the reclaiming of one's personal power and soaring to new ways of being. It's been an amazing journey for me. I've met some extraordinary people. I've had some extraordinary things. And I can tell you, when I got through reading that letter and my daughter spoke to me, I just sat there in silence and I couldn't move. I was kind of like in shock because I just heard my daughter's voice after all these years. And a little, I had on a skirt, and a little ladybug landed on my skirt, and I looked down at this ladybug, and I was just sitting there, afraid to move and hardly able to breathe. And this little ladybug was just crawling around my skirt, and my daughter spoke to me one more time. She said, Mom, that's my favorite little creature. So I wear a ladybug in her memory, and that year I started a women's retreat. It's called the Ladybug Retreat, in memory of my daughter and all the kids out there that had to die as a result of our alcoholism. And this year is our 19th year. And it's amazing things because we had some fabulous recovery at these meetings. You know, all I can say is that I came here with so much shame and guilt and remorse. And what I found in Alcoholics Anonymous is acceptance and forgiveness and understanding. And you loved me until I could learn to love myself. Today I know happiness and usefulness in a way I can't understand. But I know that I never say no to any AA request, because my life depends on me showing up. And I show up because you show up, and thank you for saving my life, and God bless you.